Today I'm going to talk to you about how people usually get stuff done, especially stuff that matters. Following a pretty influential book, The Four Disciplines of Execution. I have a few disclaimers though. These are principles I'm going to share. They are not God-sent rules. And given the fact that we are a DAO, permissionless and distributed and remote first and so on, probably like between 20 and 50% is not going to really apply. So it's more like in the camp of food for thought rather than we should really do this. And finally, last disclaimer, I am by no means an expert. It's more like this book, I believe, shares some pretty interesting insights that I think it's going to be valuable for us to discuss. And it's my personal experience. I'm not sure how much generalizable is it, but in my opinion, it's going to be a pretty good source of discussion. So that said, I would start with this quote from Sam Altman, former, I think it was like the president of YC, and then now he's at OpenAI. And he tweeted some time ago, I studied groups that have made outstanding technological achievements. What they have in common is curiosity, a big vision, an initial attack vector, a way to measure progress, people oriented towards rapid advancement, and a relentless focus on the few things that matter. That's basically what we are going to talk about today at the end of the day. So it's about how teams can achieve can make achievements given a specific vision. It's not going to be about how do you set strategy. It's more going to be about how do you execute a strategy, because strategy is really depends on the kind of organization you want to have. For some can be impact, for others can be profit, others can be scale. But the moment you actually deploy a strategy, it's a matter of execution. And execution is much less subjective. So how do you achieve strategy? There's a huge challenge when you are a team and you want to achieve things, basically. And the challenge is that getting shit done is incredibly hard, especially stuff that actually counts. So the kind of things that you want to do, and then turns out that they actually, the kind of things that actually mattered in the end, that actually moved the needle. That is hard. That is hard because strategy implies a change in the status quo. And that is hard because people need to change behavior. You cannot really expect, I don't know, dOrg, for instance, to go 4x the revenues that we do today without having people change what they do today. And that is hard. Usually, we can all agree on a new direction, and that can split into different types of decisions. Stroke of a pen and behavioral change. Stroke of a pen are snapshots. Literally, we all decide to allocate 12K for a 6-week sprint to make business development better. That is a stroke of a pen kind of decision. It's easy. We just need to vote on it. 50% plus 1, done. The problem is that then we need to actually accomplish results. We need to have that business development group that actually starts accomplishing stuff. And that implies a behavioral change, and that is hard. So at the end of the day, sometimes you get, decisions that don't result in what you expect as, an achievement because of several reasons. People don't execute well due to lack of clarity, lack of commitment, lack of accountability. This is especially true for big companies rather than small teams like ours. But lack of clarity, in my opinion, is pretty universal. If you don't really have a good understanding of the direction, we are all going for and the reason for that direction, you're not going to accomplish much, irrespective of the amount of money you decided to allocate or the amount of snapshots and votes you take. This goes much deeper. And one thing that is important to underscore is that it's not people's fault. So if people in a team do not execute well, it's a system problem, not a people problem. There's this quote that I like a lot. Anytime the majority of the people behave in a particular way, the people are not the problem. The problem is inherent in the system. This is, true in any system. Also, products, like product people and designers complaining about users not using the product in a certain manner. This is wrong. It's a product that is designed not well. And ultimately, for systems of, let's say, people trying to accomplish something together and coordinating, they do not execute well strategic initiatives because they are already doing stuff. A company, especially, long-standing companies and teams that are working together for a long time, they have their daily stuff to take care of. They have their meetings, they have their clients, their codes, their tasks. They already have daily stuff to take care of. Everyone has. And daily stuff always win over strategic stuff. In the book, the authors called this the whirlwind. And it's basically, a keyword they use to identify a principle that, in my experience, is fundamental, basically, to human nature, and that is urgent versus important. Urgent always wins. So ultimately, when you have a team that has to take care of pretty different things and then needs on top to do this strategic new stuff, they're not going to do it. And the status quo is going to is going to stay the same, is going to stay there, and stuff is not done, and leaders start complaining, and it all unravels from there. But this is a human principle we need to accept as it is. Urgent always wins. So successful execution is basically acting on strategy despite this tension between urgent and important. And this is basically all the book is about. 4 principles, 4 rules in a sense, disciplines as they name them, to basically act and make sure that the things that matter, that improve the baseline, that make the company, the team, the organization move a step forward, making sure that they are done and they get done. So these 4 disciplines, I'm going to go through them very quickly and then going deep into each one of them. They're pretty, in my opinion, pretty sensible on one side, but also easy, simple. But this doesn't mean that it's simple to, let's say, embed them into how a team usually operates. The first discipline is to focus on the wildly important. And this is all about focus, is about having clarity. So as I was mentioning before, some of the reasons why teams don't execute well has to do with a lack of clarity. So the discipline number 1 is all about making sure the team, the people inside an organization, they all know where the team is going and why. The second is to act on the lead measures. So it's all about knowing the goal, making sure we also know how to achieve the goal. Because, there's always this problem between knowing what to do and knowing where to go. And they're not the same thing. The third is to keep the score. It's about basically making sure that the team care about the progress and the team always know how we're doing. And this is mainly due to the fact that teams, especially non-experienced teams, what they do, usually they set up goals like OKRs, for instance, at the beginning of a cycle, let's say January, or the beginning of the quarter. And then they literally forget about it until the end of the quarter when they do the retrospective, 3 months later, or even 6 months, or even a year later. This is all to make sure that they keep track of how the team is doing and the fourth is about making sure that they constantly and ritually and regularly keep all each other accountable to how they're doing. The fourth discipline is all about basically catching up and making sure that the execution is actually happening. So these are the four disciplines that the book is outlining as the four ingredients that all together create this system, this operative system that, let's say, enact execution. And now, if you are familiar with, let's say, any management principle, I'm not an expert, but let's say from my experience, they all somehow boil down to these four principles. One way or another, you have Scrum with the retrospective, and it's literally discipline number 4. You have OKRs, that is literally discipline number 1 plus discipline number 2. So some ways or another, it all comes down to these four ideas. I'm going to go now deep onto each of them. But if you have any question so far, just feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, I'm going to go for the first discipline. All right. So first step to make sure the execution is running smoothly. Set wildly important goals. It's all about setting a clear and achievable finish line. Is to make sure that there's an ending point to the race, to have a winnable game. I like this quote from Steve Jobs. I'm not sure he was actually the one saying this, but the point stands. I'm as proud of what we don't do as I am of what we do. And discipline number 1 ultimately is not really about setting the goal, but it is about picking only the wildly important goals. And that's why this is the discipline of focus, ultimately. The idea is pick only 1, maybe 2 of the highest yielding goals that will make all the difference down the line to the strategy, and make sure to get them done. This is the reason why the book, from that point on, always talk about the idea of a WIG, this wildly important goal, because this is the starting point from which then derives all the rest. And it is all about wildly important. It is all about learning to say no to good ideas. It's not about setting the right goals per se. This is all about strategy. Instead, it's about learning to say no, because we really hope so, goals are fundamentally, dramatically worse than having 1, maybe 2, no matter what, life or death kind of goals. So it is ultimately about the ability of saying no, and to this is really hard for several reasons. And me personally, this is probably the mistake I make the most. But I also learned that you cannot compromise on focus. It's literally a natural principle. If you think about like sun rays, for instance, it might be a little bit naive, but I think it's a pretty effective image. If you go outside on the sun, no problem. You take a magnifying glass and you convey all the sun rays in a single spot, it's going to burn literally like stone. Same thing with human focus. The more you try to do, the less you will accomplish. And I cannot stress enough how many times I got this wrong. And number of features, like literally, let's try 10 of them. None of them is going to work. Number of people hired, let's hire all of them, and probably like the combination of them, the more the merrier. Wrong. Like focus is literally super linearly correlated with outputs. So the difference between 1 and 2 goals and 10 and 12 goals is not 1 to 10, it's more like 1 to 100. So the lack of focus is going to literally destroy your chances of making anything done. So having 1, 2 wildly important goals in the end is going to make sure that everyone is focused on the thing that matters and that will, at the end of the day, move the baseline. The book recommends this formula, which I think is pretty effective, to have 1, 2 of these goals formulated as from X to Y by a certain date. So clearly measurable results going from X to Y, and a date, a deadline by which that result must be accomplished. So if a goal is wildly important and is literally a matter of life or death, you must be able to know if you achieved it and by when. So for instance, for us, it's an example. It could be like moving from 10 to 20 active projects by June the 1st. And this might mean saying no to other things like internal activities, saying no to, I don't know, new hiring policies, saying no to upskilling existing developers, saying no to adding new features to the proposal we go for new clients, whatever. I'm not like disputing now the merit of this particular goal. It's an example, but the point I'm trying to convey is you go for one, maybe two of this kind of measurable goals, and you go all in on that for a specific time frame. And that is basically all it is about the first discipline. The second discipline instead is to make sure that the goal will happen. Because, I can say I really, really, really would like dOrg to get 20 active projects, so plus 100% clients by June, so in the next 4 months. Great. Even if I really hope that to happen, how can I make sure that this actually will happen? Discipline number 2 is all about making sure that there's a connection between effort and achievement. So it's about giving players the ability to reach the finish line. And that's this idea of, having KPIs and metrics and numbers divided in two clearly distinct categories: lag metrics and lead metrics. Lag metrics is a number that measures something that happened in the past. So they measure the result of past behavior, like GDP, for instance, like your weight, like your test score on a specific test you made in school, the amount of revenues you had in a specific moment. These are all stuff that are the result of something you did in the past. Like, for instance, the test score is the result of the amount of hours you studied in the months before. This is not controllable. By definition, it's stuck in the past. The lag metric cannot make history. So if I want to have a wildly important goal of duplicating the amount of active clients, for instance, in the company, this is a lag metric because I cannot control it. Lead metrics, on the other hand, they track the input of a process, the input of a system, and they can be influenced because they will lead to the lag metric then to happen, to a given outcome in the future to happen. So, for instance, you have calories that are the lead metric, the amount of food basically you take, that will lead to weight to change, that is the lag metric. And then body shape as a strategy, is going to basically be derived from that. Same for like time spent doing sales. If you have 1 hour a week versus 15 hours a week, that will probably change the number of contracts closed by a certain period. Percentage of peer-reviewed pull requests will decrease the lag metric of bugs in production, for instance. The number of devs interviewed will affect how much clients churn in a specific time period. So these are like the two kinds of metrics that are out there. And the point about the second discipline is all about setting and tracking 1-2 lead metrics that will affect the goal that you picked. So in the discipline number 1, you picked a very specific goal you want to accomplish, maybe 2. Discipline number 2 is about picking 1-2 lead metrics that will be predictive of that goal, and you can control them. This is incredibly important. So for instance, focus discipline number 1, you pick basically, I don't know, like you want to lose 5 kilos by the end of the month, by the end of the year, whatever. Discipline number 2 is about picking a lead metric that will affect your weight loss. In this case, let's say calories intake. It's predictive. Yes, it is predictive of weight loss, and it is controllable because you can actively make an effort to change the amount of calories you take. This is not the same as wishing you lose weight. You cannot control weight directly. You need to control it through other levers, and this is all about this is all it is about the second discipline. So pick a good lead metric, predictive and controllable, and then actually measure the metric you picked. Because discipline number 2 is not really about knowledge. It's not really about understanding the mechanics to reach a certain goal. It's also about tracking the lever that will affect down the line the lag metric. And as I said before, lead metrics make the game winnable because they connect effort with achievement. Another big mistake I made in the past and my team made is, mistakenly thinking that busyness will lead to results. So the more you work, the more you will get. And this is super wrong because sometimes you are literally focusing on the wrong thing. And naively thinking and hoping that the lag metric you want to accomplish will happen if you put enough effort. And you run in circles and you literally spend all day hoping not to lose. This is very common. Having a clear lead metric and tracking it will make the game winnable. But if the game is winnable and you're tracking the metric, but you are not making sure the whole team is aware of the metric, it's pointless. So discipline number 3 is about keeping a visible scoreboard where you are tracking all the metrics, so basically lag and lead metrics, and make sure everybody is aware about them. It's about making players care about the finish line. It's about engagement, basically. So if you are not keeping the score, you are literally just practicing. You're not playing. Discipline number 3 dictates to make a visible scoreboard. And it must be a scoreboard, a dashboard where you have an updated lead metric and an always updated lag metric. So you picked your goal at the discipline number 1, step number 1. You picked a lever, 1 or 2 levers to affect the goal. Here, it's about making sure that you always have visible an updated status about where you're at in terms of what you can affect, the lead metric. So let's say, for instance, your calorie intake today and the lag metric, so how much you weigh today, that is basically what you want to accomplish. And in this way, you can see the bet you're making playing out real time. Now, this scoreboard must have these 4 characteristics. It must be simple first. And again, I made also this mistake very, very often, going all in and making the most absurd complex charts and walls of numbers and spreadsheets. This is not useful. This is what the authors in the book call the coach scoreboard, the coach dashboard. And it's okay. Coaches need to make sure about the mechanics of what is happening inside the team. But the team must understand only where they are and where they are supposed to be. And that's it. In less than 5 seconds, that is the last point, immediate. In less than 5 seconds, the team must understand, okay, where we are right now in terms of lead metric and where we are supposed to be. I told myself that I wanted to take only X amount of calories today. And after taking this Mars bar, I already am over 20%. This is a stupid example, but you got the point. It must be visible because, if I don't see it every day, I'm not accountable to myself first and to my teammates second. So it must be visible in the sense of assuming for a moment that we have an office. It would be like a huge screen in the main hall. You would like this to be something that it's in front of you every time, and it's telling you if you're winning the game. And finally, it must be complete because it must also both shows the lead metric and the lag metric. Now, this is an example. in the book, this chart, which looks incredibly old, like coming straight out from the 80s, but it's effective. You have to beat the goat, and that's it. These are two lines. The first line is where you're supposed to be, given your commitment, and the second line is where you are right now. It plots the lag metric and the lead metric. Sorry, the lead metric, because the lag is on top of the chart. So you can make sure that you know where you are and you know if you are winning. In this case, in this particular example, you're not winning because the goat is beating you and you need to beat the goat. Now, again, naive example, but just to bring home the point of having a simple, visible, complete, and immediate scoreboard. Just a simple chart. Tell me where I am. Tell me where I'm supposed to be. And this is very important because a scoreboard compels action. This is all about engagement. This is all about making sure we all care about getting to the finish line. Because tracking and knowing are two different things. This is rooted in human psychology and human behavior. When we keep the score, we all play differently. And so I might know that if I spend enough time at the gym, and if I moderate and keep in check the calorie intake, I will affect the weight. We all know that. But it's a completely different game the moment I start tracking the time I spent in the gym, the amount of time I go exercising. So when you track the score, you know how you're doing and you can adjust accordingly. And one thing that is fascinating to me is that winning is much more powerful as an engagement driver than any other incentive. So you can give people more money, you can give people more incentives, more benefits, whatever. But ultimately, what burns out people is lack of winning, repetitive lack of winning. Um, and so having a clear game with a clear finish line uh, makes actually engagement that goes through the roof. Um, and it all comes down to making a winnable game. So discipline number one, finish line. Discipline number two, okay, how we get to the finish line. And finally, discipline number three is, do we care to get to the finish line? And these three together create a winnable game, create a game where we all want to jump on and we all want to play and to win, most importantly. Discipline number four is to then show up and win the damn thing, is where execution actually happens. Because the first three disciplines, the first three ideas, they all happen basically at the beginning. Let's say that we all come down together next week using the financial plan, and we all agree on one, maybe two wildly important goals. Okay, great. We then identify how to move those goals with 1, 2 lead metrics for each team. Okay, fine, good. We have then a dashboard displaying the lead and a goal for each swarm. Easy, done. And that's done in a matter of probably days, even just one single session. Easy. Then execution happens every day with the fourth discipline. That is basically having regular status meeting. Super simple, super maybe trivial, but this is possibly the most important rule of them all. If this, let's say, ritual meeting, regular meeting, is happening in the right way. So, in case you're wondering, yes, basically that's a retro meeting. It must be regular, so at least weekly. So it's not really retro, but you got the idea. So you have to have consistency. It's all about frequency of status updates, not really quantity. Not really quantity because it must also be brief, no more than 20, 30 minutes. So like a daily chat or a weekly chat that we are already doing. Like the swarm calls and the business development calls, they are exactly that. With the one exception, that is that these, let's say, ritual, this ritual of accountability must also be structured with a clear agenda that is tied to the previous review, the previous status update, and it all boils down to how can we move the needle. With the needle, of course, that is the lead metric we talked about before. So This is all about holding each other accountable, for moving the lead measures, despite the daily stuff we all have to do. So yes, of course, you need to take care of daily stuff, sure. But what are you doing on top of your usual urgent stuff? What are you doing to move the lead measures, to move the needle? So every week, the team commits to a new set of tasks that will actually move the lead measures, and we'll adjust accordingly every other week, basically. So this is a just-in-time execution plan, because it's impossible to forecast changing requirements. This is very often happening in larger organizations, where you have like a monthly plan of every tasks that everyone needs to do, and then after a month or even like a year, sometimes you catch up and you see that it didn't matter, because the world changed and the requirements and context changed. So this is all about making a just-in-time execution plan with one single thing fixed at the beginning, that is what measure, what kind of KPI we're going to track in order to change to affect the goal. Structured in the sense that we're going to see the exact agenda, but the idea is to have it structured and consistent. And consistency is critical, because the idea is that you must have this kind of compounding effect. It's the same rule at the end of the day of like not skipping one-on-ones, for instance, not skipping all hands meetings. You don't want to miss momentum. You don't want to convey the implicit message that you as a leader, but also you as a team member, you don't care. So never miss a week, never miss momentum, never cancel it. Do it consistently in order not to stop compounding, basically. And never let the daily stuff get into the session. Again, this is probably not really applicable to what is happening in the swarms, because by definition, they are not about projects. But I've seen this happening multiple times in, let's say, product-centric companies, where you start a strategic meeting like this one, even though it's like a status update of tasks, but it's still a strategic meeting. And then like you start talking about the client that is not paying, and then the investor that is not replying to emails, and the new upcoming investor meeting you need to take care of. And daily stuff, the whirlwind, gets in the way. You cannot afford to do so. You need to focus exclusively on what we can do to move the scoreboard, the lead metric, in order to move the lag metric. Staff meeting can happen later. And the agenda boils down to three very simple things. See what happened in the past, update, and basically recommit by reviewing the scoreboard. So first, report on commitments. So here's what I learned after this week. Here's why I did what I did or didn't do what I committed to do. And this is what happened to the scoreboard. So for instance, let's take again an example of changing the wildly important goal of moving from 10 to 20 active clients by the end of the semester. Okay, great. Lead metric is sales calls. This is predictable and controllable. Great. So first, this week I decided to commit. I committed to make at least 3 phone calls. I didn't do it. Why? And you explain the reason. You review the scoreboard didn't move. The lag metric didn't move. You plan and adjust and move accordingly. So it all boils down to what are the 1-2 most important things that I can do this week. And we are talking about tasks here, literal actions, in order to impact the lead measures that will then impact the lag metric, the lag KPI. So the structure is pretty simple, trivial even, but it's effective. And there's no, let's say, daily ops coming in that has nothing to do with moving the lead. So if the first three disciplines create a winnable game, the fourth is about winning the game. So just to recap, first discipline, set 1, maybe 2 life or death goals that can help you achieve your strategy. So you have go from X to Y by when, clear finish line. Secondly, how do we get to the finish line? So 1, 2 KPIs that you can control and that do influence your end goal, and you start tracking them. Third, tracking both real time and making sure the score is highly visible. So you know every time as a single individual and as a team and as a company, so the entire organization is aware of where you are and when you should be instead. And this can, these three things can happen, let's say, both as an organization, but also inside atomic teams. So it's okay to have 5 different goals if there are 5 different teams that have nothing to do with each other. And they all will have their own lead metrics, and they all will have their scoreboards, and they all will have, that is the fourth discipline, a time to catch up weekly, ideally, to see how they're doing and to commit to new actions to basically change the lead metrics. The thing is that ideally, everyone in the whole organization should be aware of the goals of every team, if there are multiple goals because there are multiple teams, and the lead metrics and the actions they're taking, because it all helps, let's say, be fully synchronized and coordinated, and making sure that nobody's doing something without being aligned for the underlying strategy. Well, this is basically, let's say, here stops the book. And it's basically the first part of the book. There's a whole second part that I didn't include because I didn't think it was particularly relevant. That is on how to literally, go on and make what I described you. So what kind of questions to ask while setting wildly important goals? What kind of questions to ask to make sure that the lead metrics are the right metrics? What kind of questions to ask during a ritual meeting, weekly meeting? I don't think they're particularly interesting right now. I just wanted to make sure that, let's say, the fourth ideas were conveyed. And I wanted to just spend the last few minutes on what OKRs have to do with everything I just described. Just because, I suggested to talk about this and to have this small workshop because I thought that these two topics were tied, and you're going to see why. At the end of the day, objectives and key results, so OKRs, are the first and the second discipline. So the first discipline is set wildly important goals, and they are objectives. Usually in the OKR setting, the rule would be don't go over 3 to 5 different objectives. It's more conservative. The 4 disciplines of execution is more like 1, 2, but it is the same. Have focus on clear objectives that are measurable from X to Y by when. Have lead metrics, and these are the key results ultimately. So if you think about this, OKRs are just an implementation of the 4 disciplines of the execution, or the other way around, like 4 disciplines are a generalization of OKRs. But the bottom line is that we are talking mostly about the same thing. Provided that we have a strategy, making sure that the strategy is rooted in data and that everyone is swimming in the right direction, rowing in the same direction and with the same amount of effort. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that the risk of this approach is bureaucracy. And this usually is, in my experience, more dangerous with bigger teams. So for dOrg in this case, I don't think is particularly relevant, but still, the problem with business strategies and management techniques and so on is to drown in like processes, is to make sure that we all follow the technique by the letter. And in my experience, again, definitely made this mistake personally. This is very dangerous because it's easy to follow a technique to the letter and to feel good about it. Yes, I am a great manager, I am a great team leader, I'm a great startup founder, and then in the end the substance is slipping. So processes must not get in the way of action. I wanted to make sure to bring this point as well to the table. But I think that these 4 principles in the end are pretty good at not becoming too much bureaucratic. At the end of the day, it's all about setting a specific goal, making sure to track the progress towards that goal, to make sure that that progress is visible and always there to be seen every time, always updated for everyone to see and to be accountable for. And finally, every week, every day, depending on the context, making sure that everyone commits to a set of actions that will change the numbers to which we all committed to. So just to bring back the quote from the beginning, technological achievements, how they made it, again, curiosity, big vision, initial tech vector. Sure, these are strategy things. A way to measure progress, rapid advancement, and relentless focus on the few things that matter. As you can see, it kind of like all comes together. These are like 4 principles. I'm pretty sure that some Altman never read the book. Pretty sure. But that's in the end is talking about the same thing. 4 principles that we can then decide how it's best to implement. They can take different flavors, different ideas. But at the end of the day, I think, it all comes down to measuring progress, moving fast, and being narrowly focused on the few things that matter.